32 minutes past 5. So we'll start, and I'm hoping that others will join us as we read along. So we did read this very interesting last chapter where we came to know about the names that were given to girl children and how there was this sense of them not being wanted in the homes that they were being born in. So Madhuri had certainly made the right impact in the meeting, using the right tone, hitting the right note, using the right examples. She championed the girls and yet respected the local customs. Beneath her veil, she conformed, but at the same time pushed the village to change. Larger village meetings were getting our messages heard at scale, and both leaders and the village at large were starting to change their minds and build a village wide commitment. There was immense power in mobilizing everyone to make a case for girls' education. Through their own examples, they created the space for mindset change in their communities as we started to realize the power of storytelling. Our job was to create the right platforms, and then it was all about stories being told so that new stories could be written for the girls. Plays that perform the perils. A wonderful example of an alliteration over here. And so, this is how we slowly started to change the story for girls. At doorsteps and in meetings, we harness stories from each village to clearly illustrate the importance of education and the importance of girls. To challenge mindsets and change both beliefs and behaviors, we had to show and illustrate as clearly as possible the perils of illiteracy and the injustice of excluding girls from school. We had to find narratives to help parents loosen their tight grip on the past, on culture, on traditions, and visualize a better future for their daughters. We listened, we heard stories, and we began to share these stories at every opportunity. Those stories became plays, and eventually, those plays slowly started to communicate the messages we wanted to be heard. One such play was being performed at a Ratri Chopal evening meeting. In some of the villages, it was pointless going door to door during the day as most of the parents were working. We started to arrange evening meetings and make them a little more sociable and engaging by putting on plays. The sun would set at almost the same time every day in Rajasthan the whole year round. As the sky turned a dirty pink, the cicadas struck up their chorus and the air became thick with the smell of wood burning stoves and the evening meal. We tended to hold our meetings at around 8 p.m. It was cool, everyone was fed, and with the light of their mobile phone batteries, the community would find their way home from uh, uh, find their way from their homes to the courtyard by the school. On one particular evening, when I joined such a meeting, the stage was set. The team had laid out a large blue tarpaulin on the wide road outside the village shop and the Sarpanch's house. It was very dark, but three bright light bulbs were strung across the street and a lantern dangled in front of the screen we had erected, making an odd shadow across the film screen. Educate Girls posters also hung from the electricity wires like washing on the line, enclosing the space almost like a tent and at the same time reinforcing our message. The village members sat in groups and the actors took their position just in front of the screen. One field coordinator was acting as Alka, a mother who was missing her son. Alpesh, Alka's son in the play, was 16 and had struggled to earn enough money in the village, so he had moved out of the district in search of work. He would occasionally write to his mother to keep her abreast of his movements, but as she couldn't read, she would rely on someone reading his letters to her. This was all narrated to the audience by the budding NGO workers turned actors. A new letter arrived, and Alka was seen waving it and looking for someone to help her understand it. Alka walked around the audience with the letter in her hand, asking for help to read it. Eventually, Alka found someone to help her, but she too admitted she was only able to read a little and couldn't fully understand what the letter said. Another actor took the letter, pulled it close to his face, and demonstrated difficulty in reading it. Aaj mar gaya, her friend read out haltingly. Yes, that's it. Aaj mar gaya. As those words sank in, Alka's blood ran cold. Today he died? Her only son, her beautiful boy, had gone in search of work, been away for 3 months, and today he had died? Distraught, she snatched the letter and ran off. I knew the story already as we had discussed it as a team, but even I was moved by the emotional performance. The play continued, with Alka now shrouded in white acting out the last rites for her son. Mourning, the actors left the stage. A month later, they announced. There was a knock on the door, and Alka, still in mourning, opened it. It was Alpesh, her son. She dropped whatever was in her hands. My son, she screamed, acting like she had seen a ghost. How is this possible? How come you are alive? Your letter said, Aaj mar gaya? Ma, मैं अजमेर गया था, said Alpesh. The letter did not say Aaj mar gaya, it said Ajmer gaya. I went to the town of Ajmer, he explained. Her son was back. She had thought he was dead, but Alpesh had been to Ajmer in search of work. He was back from the dead. The gathered crowd fell about in hysterics. Death is no laughing matter. But the team used this rather extreme but true story to illustrate the perils of illiteracy. We need our girls to read, was the overwhelming message. The other example that night was the story of a woman, Anu, who had an eye infection. Anu went to the doctor to show him her eye, and he prescribed some eye ointment in a small yellow tube that she had to apply several times a day. Anu went home and after some time asked her daughter-in-law, Sita, बहू जरा मेरी पीली ट्यूब लेकर आना आंख में डालनी है. Daughter-in-law, bring me the ointment in the yellow tube to put in my eye. Again, our friend team took on the roles of the woman and her daughter-in-law. They had two different yellow tubes that they dramatically placed on a makeshift table. Anu beckoned to Sita to fetch her the eye ointment. Sita approached the table and picked up a yellow tube, squinting at the writing on it, obviously unable to read the name or application instructions. She pretended to put what she thought was the eye ointment into her mother-in-law's eyes. The next moment, Anu was reeling in pain and Sita was distraught as she realized she has put a highly toxic tire glue into her mother-in-law's eye instead of the eye ointment. The two tubes were held aloft. The reaction of the crowd this time was less raucous and more shocked and uncomfortable as Anu was rendered blind. Again, this was all based on a true story. The point was again driven home about how critical it was for our girls to be able to read. Literacy could be a matter of life or death. The negative loop. The plays were highly effective. and a great way for our team members to communicate to a larger audience in one sitting, but also rehearse the arguments and negotiations they often made on doorsteps to one family at a time. On another evening, when I joined a session, two highly effective arguments were made on stage by Jaspreet and Gauri, two Educate Girls team members. My wife can only be seen by a female doctor. Jaspreet was playing the role of a determined husband seeking to protect his wife and have her examined only by a female doctor. An understandable position for us city dwellers who have a choice when we want to see a doctor. Most practices or hospitals have more than one doctor and a mix of male and female professionals. In rural India, this is not the case. Sir, until more girls are allowed to go to school and study at college, there won't be any female doctors to look after your wife, Gaudi continued, playing herself. Can I ask if your daughter goes to school? I won't send my daughter to school unless and until the teacher is a woman, Jaspreet retorted, acting as a defiant father. Sir, again, until more girls are allowed to go to school and study at college, there won't be any female teachers for your village and for your daughter, Gauri explained in a resigned tone, pointing out the negative loop of denying a girl her education. The hope was that the point would be made and that the audience would see the bind this father was getting himself into. Although across India, there is by and large gender parity in the teaching profession at the primary level, in the most remote parts of the country, village teachers are much more likely to be men. And until this missing generation of girls are allowed to go to school and complete 12 years of education, there will be no female doctors to attend to the women as they fall ill, and there will be no female teachers to break the cycle of illiteracy. Real life examples of the need for education are one of the strongest levers for change. In these real stories and short sketches, the audience was being shown how short sighted so much of this mindset is. The mindset of the burden, the mindset of the liability, the mindset of the girl that needs shutting away, protecting from the world. To counter all these narratives, we need stories that paint a picture of a much brighter future through the legal protection of girls' rights and education. And this is how we turn the page. Stories of solutions. I get up around 5 a.m. and collect the water. Once I'm home by 6 a.m., I start to prepare the food and then help my brother bathe and get ready for school. I sweep and tidy the house, and then if everything is ready, I go to school with my brother. Otherwise, if I still have some chores to do, like laundry, I am late for school. This is what Neeti told me when I met her a year after we had helped enroll her into school. Neeti had started off going to school part time, but over the course of the year, she had worked out how to manage all her chores before and after school hours. However, she was tired. This was not an easy situation. But parents do get used to the new routine and start to see the benefits of education over time. To create a contrast with the stories of the perils of illiteracy, we also shared stories of young girls who have thrived through education, stories of practical solutions that have been implemented by parents who have sent their girls to school. Parents want to hear stories of families like themselves who have managed to cope once their daughters have gone to school. Sometimes it is a philosophical or ideological debate that is won, but sometimes it is purely practical. We tried anything and everything that might work. When families are paralyzed by the fear that the work won't get done, we are fighting two battles: the battle against poverty and the circumstances that put families into situations where they need everyone to work and earn. Who will look after the goats? Who will run the shop? Who will clean the house and look after the baby sibling so both parents can earn? As well as the battle of patriarchy that dictates that this is all a daughter's job, not a son's. Our team strategizes and helps find ways, and often we have to negotiate and take it slow. Parents and girls who have never been to school need time to get used to the idea. Girls need to get used to going to school, sitting in the classroom. Parents need to get used to the fact that their girls are not home all day, every day. Generally, schools are open to children coming for part of the day so they can get used to the change and, if necessary, balance their work and lessons. Invariably, when this happens, families slowly realize they can cope, and the girls are often allowed to then go to school full time. For many girls, the reality is such that they still have to get the work done and only then go to school. Going to school is not an easy path when all the odds are stacked against you. The parallel lives of goats and girls, imagine. This was a solution we used for Meenu eventually. We were again at a village meeting where Chandan, one of the fathers, stood up and, with an air of pride, explained the changes he had made in his household to accommodate his daughter's wish to go to school. We do need more help to graze the goats, but we manage. If Meenu goes to school, she will have an opportunity to make something of herself, to get a job and a good husband. He paused, perhaps recollecting some of the things the Educate Girls volunteer had explained about the injustices of child marriage. But in time, maybe when she is 20, he clarified. The ambition for a good marriage remained. Meenu's agency was perhaps not yet her own, but the goat herding barrier had been overcome. Goats were no longer her reason for being. Meenu's father aspired for something more for her. Here was a father who had changed his mind, but it hadn't always been this way. When we first met Chandan 2 years ago, the school was too far. When I arrived at their home, it was late. The grasshopper's rattle had begun. The heat had been removed from the sun, and as it disappeared into the embrace of the valley, the shadows chased us across the village. We had missed Minu's parents every time we visited the village, so that time we went in the evening. Seema, her mother, had spent all day in the nearby town selling bundles of wheat. Chandan reached home a little later, and just as I asked where Meenu was, I heard the discordant chime of the goats' bells as they returned from the hill. Every day, Meenu covered a good 5 kilometers with the goats. During the summers, it was harder to find a patch to graze. Her days were hard and long. But Meenu also enjoyed being out in the fields, except for when the heat wave came. And recently the heat seemed harsher and the wave longer. After a number of years in the fields with her goats and her goats' parents, Meenu knew them as well as her own sisters. This is Bakasura Bakri. She has a long neck, she laughed, expecting me to remember that Bakasur was a crane demon. This is Balaram, and the white one is Banasur. This one is Bhadra. She is Bhadra. She is the mother. And this is Bhishmaka. I was quite taken aback that Meenu's goats were all named after characters from the Bhagavad Puran. No one in her family could read, but stories were passed down from generation to generation, recounted, not read. And Meenu remembered them by repeating them a lot mostly to her goats. Eventually, I asked, why does Meenu not go to school? School bahut dur hai. School is too far, her parents explained. Meenu was 8 years old, but had not yet set foot in the local school. They were right. Their home only just belonged to this village. It was a 2 kilometer walk along the road that led out of the village and climbed the first elevation of the ridge where Chandan and Seema lived. We listened and nodded. There was a hint of fear and an air of protection in her voice as Seema continued. It doesn't seem safe to have Meenu walk all that way every day. Surakshit nahi hai. It is not safe. There aren't any other children who live this far from the school. But Meenu walked more than 5 kilometers a day with the goats. She scaled the dusty hillock behind their home, not alone as she had the goats for company, but alone really. She went to the river to wash clothes. She went to the well to collect water. Meenu also had to go to the fields to defecate as there was no bathroom at their home. Safety was another school of thought. The default position when explaining school absence was distance, safety, school dur hai. But we had to work out a way to challenge this constructively. Avoiding shame and criticism, pointing out capabilities, allaying fear, and building confidence. A girl's absence from the school register was so often explained through an insurmountable problem. But it was noticeable how this was just not the case for boys. Whereas the default position for girls was that education was too difficult. Distance was rarely an issue for a boy. Safety was not a concern. School was not too far for their sons. But for their daughters, it was different. It took us pointing out with encouragement and empathy that Meenu's daily commute with her goats was at least twice as far as school. That the road into the village was actually a lot safer than scaling the hill on her own. After the first few 100 yards, it even turned from track to concrete. Slowly, we chipped away at the barrier. Eventually, we unearthed the fact that no one else was there to look after the goats if Meenu was in school. But again, we listened. It wasn't every day that Seema was not around for the goats. The job could be shared. How about we start by enrolling Meenu in school and she can go for half a day? For Seema and Chandan to go from having a full-time goat herder to nothing was a step too far, too fast. We suggested a solution where Meenu attended school in the mornings, but by mid-afternoon she could take the goats. As the weeks rolled by, the family found ways. Meenu balanced her homework with helping out. Her education slowly became a priority. And a year on, Chandan was at the village meeting mentioning his story, Meenu's story, to influence some of his neighbors to send their girls to school. The worries of a widow. We perhaps stayed a little long at the school one morning a few days later, and we had nearly visited all the houses on our list before the sun decided to halt us in our tracks. Exhausted, dripping with sweat, we took cover in the shade of the school and recuperated with warm water from our bottles and energy from our tiffins. But after a couple of hours in the shade, we set out again by around 3 p.m., determined to reach Anil Bhai's house. Anil Bhai had died 18 months ago from some fever, we were told. It was often hard to understand the cause of death in many cases, as medical professionals were rarely involved, and many life threatening ailments included a fever. It was likely he had died of malaria, but it could have been dysentery, It could have been dengue. Whatever the diagnosis, Anil Bhai had died, leaving behind a wife, five daughters, and his aging mother. When we talk about going to the margins, I experienced this in its most visceral sense that day. In the village meeting, they had pointed to the hut across the fields and the tiny temple. It had been marked on the not to scale map by a little purple arrow at the very edge of the paper, pointing southwest with the distance 2 kilometers written next to it. So we walked 2 kilometers, following the map, past the wayside shrine that had a fresh string of marigolds and a smouldering clay diya lamp. The late Anil Bhai's home was on the edge of a forest. And the absence of schemes, in the absence of work, in the absence of Anil Bhai, it was a forest that now sustained his family. This was to be our last household visit that day, as I found it incredibly hard to tear myself away. Anil Bhai's widow, Shanti, was once an energetic woman. She plucked a faded photo from behind a mirror that was hung on the wall, one of those stiff, garlanded wedding photos. But the couple looked unusually happy. In most of such photos, the lack of love and the forced nature of the arranged marriage was only too obvious. But Shanti looked quite radiant, quite plump. That was over a decade ago, she sighed. Since then, Shanti had had five daughters who had to this day never set foot in a school. She had lost a husband and a lot of weight. She had been in conversation for a good hour before Shanti tried to serve me tea, and I tried to change the subject swiftly. No tea was made, and I just about felt comfortable asking her, "How many meals do you have every day, Shanti?" Not wanting to embarrass her, but wanting to really understand her situation. "Once a day. We eat once a day." She explained that she and her daughters were able to forage some food from the woods, and beyond that, they relied on rations. But none of this made for 3 meals a day. Her shriveled mother in law had to be carried out of the hut in the morning, out of the sun and into the shade every hour or so as the sun moved, then back into the hut in the evening. Shanti had to do all of this with seven mouths to feed and no end to the cycle inside. School हम जैसे लोगों के लिए नहीं है. People like us can't afford to go to school. School is not for families like ours. Shanti was adamant. But Shanti, I implored, your girls can have a hot meal every day at school, and it's free. I don't think she quite understood what I was saying. No one had ever taken the time to explain to Shanti that school was free and the midday meal was free. By the end of the hour or so with Shanti, I saw a new glint in her eyes, a glimpse of the Shanti from her wedding photo. Her grief was perhaps lifting. She was beginning to see something positive for her girls and an escape from the trap. As we dragged ourselves away, we left the household a little lighter. There was, of course, still a long process to finally get the girls to school. But we left five girls excited at the prospect of school and a mother excited at the prospect of their lunch. I again asked to visit Shanti 2 years later when I returned to her block for a government meeting. I had been really keen to visit her once more as she had made such an impression on me. With raising five daughters on her own, I was keen to make sure she had the support she needed. Her girls were all going to school, all five of them. What had changed Shanti's mind, I wondered. Manjula Didi was so persistent, Shanti recalled, explaining her meeting with the Educate Girls volunteer. But I had a fight on my hands. Anil Bhai's mother, Mary Saas, mother in law, was adamant that the girls should stay at home even when I explained about the midday meals. What will the community think if the girls were walking to school every day? It's so far. They will bring shame on the family crossing the village in front of the village youth. Shanti mimicked the old lady's intonation, her outrage, her indignation. The very idea that a girl's grandmother would stand in the way of a girl's education was a shock. But this was nothing we hadn't seen before. But when I became a widow, I realized how vulnerable we were. I am illiterate and can only work in the fields. What chance did I have to give my girls a better life if I couldn't access even the basics? Manjula Didi got to know us and realized that I wasn't drawing my widow's pension. I wasn't aware of it. Not being able to read is like not being able to see half the world, maybe more than half. I thought to myself as Shanti spoke. Manjula Didi told me the story of a widow in the next village who was not only able to draw her pension but had gone back to school and qualified as an Anganwadi worker. That's what I want for my girls. And I think it is what Anil Bhai would have wanted too. Being widowed doesn't have to be the end. Deepti, my eldest, is now teaching me to write. And with that, she picked up a stick and carefully wrote her name in the dry earth. Shanti. See, she told me proudly. Turning the page, the idea that a girl is a liability, that the journey to school is not safe, that girls should stay at home and prepare for marriage, and the specter of a love marriage. This is all a school of thought and one that has to be challenged. The main barriers driving this mindset can be divided into two clear categories: poverty and patriarchy. When the barrier is patriarchal mindset, you have to build and drive home the importance of girls' education. You have to show how girls' education makes a difference in a hyper local context. When the barrier is poverty, as we saw in Shanti's case, then you have to ensure you support the family with knowledge and the skills to access social protection schemes, to help build resilience and room for girls to be able to go to school and then eventually, hopefully, break that cycle of economic hardship. What we're talking about here is shifting mindsets. And the process for that is through deep human connection, active listening, authentic empathy, and shared vulnerability. We realized that this was not about facts, it was about emotional engagement. It was personal, not theoretical. And that's why the team was so important to our ability to change both hearts and minds. What a chapter and what a revelation. I'm just thinking about, how little we know of our own rural areas and of the challenges that they face in these places without the basic amenities of life. I don't think Rajasthan is an exception. In fact, I would say that these villages or villagers were probably lucky because they found somebody in Educate Girls who could make a difference. But I shudder to think of what is happening in many other states which are probably a little more backward and don't have any kind of an exposure to this kind of a education and education schemes and things like this. We have about 5 minutes more, 5 or 6 minutes more. And if there are any thoughts to be shared, I'd welcome that before we can just read the next beginning of the next chapter. But ideally, if we have anything to discuss and anybody would want to share something, please do so. Just switch on your mics and you can speak if you want to share something. Last time also, I think it moved a lot of us, and when we come to the end of this chapter, we realize how lucky we are as women coming from enlightened homes and educated people around us. But I was sharing this last week also with all of you, that I think even in NCR, which is hardly backward, we still have a whole lot of people from certain ranks of society who are really not going to school, who are not getting educated. So I think, I don't know, maybe we also have some kind of a duty towards them and persuade them to go to school. Yes, Pushpita, please share.
Yes, ma'am. Like you rightly said, that even in places like Delhi NCR,
Yeah,
we still have these pockets where this mentality still exists, that, girls are
absolutely.
somehow, uh, you know, inferior to boys, and the boys deserve all the extra attention and the push they
Yes,
can get to get ahead in future. The
absolutely.
last
Yeah.
school where I was teaching, that was in Greater Noida.
Hmm.
That was Delhi World Public School. But
Yeah.
even there, we would see that most of the girls, when they reached grade 12, the
Hmm.
general this thing was that now it's time for them to get married. They have a
Yes.
basic education, and now the family will go ahead and get them married, because they have now, they are now suitable. They have got that extra this thing for
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
marriage.
So they would get a proper
Yeah.
match
Huh.
because they have qualified to do
They have
so.
qualified,
Yeah.
they can at least teach their children, and that
Absolutely.
is what they want. So,
Yeah.
so
It
that's
is sad.
common.
It's very sad, and I think it's not enough just to have it written all over the place on the backs of the trucks and things like that. Ladki padhao, beti bachao, and things like that. We should actually see it happening at ground level. And she rightly points out that people are not aware of the schemes that the government has also. So our gram panchayats and village pradhans barely do anything to make the villagers understand that these are the facilities you have. Take, for instance, the Jan Aushadhi stores. You have these generic medicine shops which are all run by, in the name of Pradhan Mantri Jan Aushadhi Yojana or whatever. So I actually go to these to the generic medicine shops to get my medicines. For the last few years we've been doing that. And coming from the background that I'm coming, I find that my medicine expense has come down to like one fourth of what I used to spend, because I get generic medicines at the Jan Aushadhi or the Dawa India shop. And when I talk to my driver or when I talk to my maid, they have no idea that there are such shops existing, that they can. And people have told them, wahan ki dawai kaam nahi karti. So
Right.
this is another thing, the doctors write all these medicines and give it to them, fancy medicines, or they just give them the medicine and take the money from them. And these people, because they are not aware, they don't read, so they just accept what they get. So I make it a point. I always tell them, like I've driven my driver crazy, telling him, go and get your Ayushman card made, go and get your medical card made, you will get free treatment in the hospitals, you will get an insurance. I drove my maid crazy, go and open your bank account, you will get so many facilities. But they just don't know. And I keep saying, what does your village pradhan do? And
Hmm.
they say, we don't know, we don't even know that these things can happen. So I
Right.
think, a lesson for all of us from this book at least is that maybe in our own way, we being educated and aware of things should spread the word with these people. In fact, in school, I have spoken to so many of these housekeeping people and others and told them, do you have this card? Have you registered yourself? Have you got a bank account? I keep asking them. I talk to them about Jan Aushadhi and things like that. So I think we should play a part in being a good citizen, I would say.
Uh, Ma'am, there is also another personal anecdote I would like to share.
Yeah.
I was in Rajasthan for a long time after my
Okay.
marriage, so we had moved to Jodhpur, and then my daughter was born there in Jodhpur.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that shifted to Jaipur, and then eventually came
Mm.
to Noida. So when my daughter was born in Jodhpur,
Mm.
my mother-in-law, she was there, and when the
Yeah.
doctor came out and announced that it's a baby girl, she
Mm.
was so overwhelmed by emotions that she started crying.
Yeah.
And in Rajasthan, like they think that a
Oh,
beti
it's so normal to do that.
yes, they cry when it's a girl child. So my husband was like, "You mustn't cry here, you will think you're sad." So
Because they would get the
yes,
impression that she's crying because a girl has been born.
that she said
Right? Yeah.
that she was
Yeah. That's
actually
right.
happy.
She was actually happy that a girl child was born. True. So yeah, I suppose it's not only Rajasthan, it's everywhere in India. It's
Yes,
everywhere. I mean, it's like, okay, oh, you have a boy. It's like, oh, you've achieved something kind of.
something,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
It is everywhere in India. Am
Yeah.
I audible, ma'am?
Yeah, yeah, you are. Yeah.
Yeah, it is because I have just come from Bandarjud,
Ah,
and you know the condition that the village
right.
was in. Okay,
Yeah.
the girls were not being sent to school because they've
Mm.
matured. This was one
Yeah.
reason, and the other was they did not want to spend money on the girl child.
That's right.
Okay,
Yes.
and then if the girl did not want to study, no big deal.
Ah,
We'll
yeah,
get
we
her
get them
married off,
married. Ah.
and the children decided to join the school because of the food program, not so much because
Right.
of the
Yes.
educational
Yeah.
benefits
But
and all those things. Right.
exactly. But at least that is an incentive.
That
But
is an incentive, but
yeah.
I'm talking in a different sense that they were
Yeah.
paying a 600 rupees fee. Okay,
Okay.
food was not such an issue for
Ah,
them, but
ah,
and yet
ah,
they were doing it, and so
ah.
that shows a lot, right? And
Yeah.
then, of course, even we can say that the more poor we may be able to convince them because of their conditions, like this
Yes. Yes.
chapter was mentioning.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
about the ones who think that they are slightly well off, though they are not
Ah.
really
So
well off,
it doesn't
and
really matter. Yeah.
to them it does not matter. So convincing them is a
It is
bigger
a difficult thing.
task.
It is a
Yeah.
difficult task. Yes, I
So
saw Shweta and Rohini's hand also up. Shweta, you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Ma'am, I just wanted to share one incident.
Yeah.
When I go to my in-laws' house, it's in Uttar Pradesh,
Mm.
village near. It's in Balia, basically. So
Right.
I have a house help there,
Mm.
and I was really overwhelmed to hear her struggle, her story.
Mm.
She
Mm.
was a divorcee. She had
Okay.
2 kids, and she
Ah,
was taking care of the whole family, like
right.
herself and her 2 kids, all
Mm.
alone. And she made sure that her children get proper education, though she was working day in, day out as a
Right.
house help in different houses with a meager wage of like 700 rupees. But
Mm.
still, she was struggling. And,
Yeah.
luckily, it was COVID time when I had this time to sit together because I was there with my family
Right.
during
Yeah.
the COVID time. So,
Mm-hmm.
when I heard her story, I felt that, people like that lady are the
Mm.
real heroes who are actually building up a house,
True.
building up
A
a
society, in fact.
society. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
They're contributing to the society, to the
With
community.
all their
That's exactly
struggle.
what we
And
need to do. Yes.
yes, and it's not that she's not aware of all the facilities. I was also, equally mesmerized by the fact that she knew what all government policies are
Yeah.
there. She had it for her daughter,
Just to, yeah.
the thing where Sukanya Yojana and all, everything.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
had it all done. But
Yeah.
then the fact is, after one point, they
Ah.
too take a step back
Yes. True.
because they know that this is the maximum they could do. And
Huh.
from there, they couldn't continue further with
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
struggle. So they
Yeah,
have
but
to
it
pull
kind
back
of
then.
it's at least catching on now. Some amount is catching on, but still,
Yes,
what we read about is so true still in many parts of the country, and
yes,
we
it
should
is. It is.
we should continue to push to build awareness.
Yes,
Definitely, This is
Yes, and
something
I
that,
thought that, when we talk about Women's Day, when we celebrate Women's
yeah,
Day, it is these women who
he's
are actually,
absolutely right. They are the ones who should be getting the highlight. Yeah, the
yes,
limelight rather.
yes.
Yes, Rohini, quickly one word because we've just run out of time.
Oh, I just wanted to share like when in Noida also,
Yes.
like they are talking about small places and some, but then in Noida also when my niece was born, and my mother was very happy. She started, we do Vara Fera and all.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
did that and she gave money to the nurses over there, and they were like, "Why are you happy? The people who come here, they start crying and howling when a daughter is born." So my mother was like, "No, I'm very." Even my sister-in-law's father was sad, but I'm
Huh.
very sad. You have got a
Oh,
daughter. So
oh.
my mother was very happy. Means what kind of mentality today also
Yes.
people have.
Today,
And
yes,
she,
it is true. It is true. Absolutely true. Yeah. Great. Good sharing. We'll meet again next Thursday to read the rest of it and see how slowly and steadily the book is becoming more and more interesting because of all the incidents being shared and lives of people being shared. Right? Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sneha.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye bye.
You,
Good
ma'am.
night.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
ma'am.